Hey guys, how you doing? So this is the last session on chapter 7, and we're going to look particularly at extinctions. Okay, let's jump straight into it. Um, extinctions. Now, when every member of a particular species is no longer alive on Earth, we sort of say that that particular species is extinct. Okay, and that sort of happens when we think that 50 years have passed since its last reliable sighting, and then we therefore presume the organism to be extinct. And the causes of extinctions can vary. It's not as, sometimes it's a bit difficult to identify what exactly made this particular species go extinct, but we break it down to kind of two main things, and these are called proximal causes versus ultimate causes. Now, the terminology can be a bit confusing, and nothing sort of ever sort of is fitting nicely into a particular category. Proximal causes are kind of your immediate reasons, and then your ultimate causes are kind of your underlying or your kind of big picture stuff. Yeah. So when you think of proximal, things like when a species doesn't have enough resources, for example, it doesn't have enough food or it doesn't have enough shelter or whatever, then all the species dies and then it goes extinct. When the species is being hunted, overexploitation, overpredation or outcompeted, meaning other organisms have actually beaten it in terms of its survival capabilities. Things like pollution, and also if the organism was reliant on another one, and that one dies, then it's a co-extinction. Yeah? And so those are all proximal causes. They're immediate causes that have resulted in the death of the organism and therefore the death of the species. Now, when we talk about kind of your big picture stuff, these are kind of your ultimate causes. Yeah. So ultimate causes are, for example, when you have rapid changes in your environment. For example, if it was some sort of habitat degradation, like forest deforestation, right? If a forest is being cleared out and removed, then what that does is that's a rapid change in the environment, and it's the removal of the habitat. And as a result of habitat, deforestation, then you might say that it doesn't have enough resources, and then it gets, experiences other things like overpredation because it's got nowhere to hide, etc., etc. Yeah. Things like climate change, these are your big picture stuff. Yeah. So when there's a change in the climate, and that sort of leads on to other things. It leads on to things like organisms, the changes in their environment, and then the temperature dropping, and then cold temperatures killing coral reefs and things like that. Yeah. So those are your ultimate causes, and the ultimate causes are very, very kind of general. Yeah. Loss of genetic diversity can result in a species dying out over time because there's not enough to overcome things like disease. Genetic pollution as well, if you crossbreeds and things like that, can actually weed out a particular species and replace it with a different hybrid species of so forth and so forth. Okay, so those are the kind of the main causes. And the thing that we have to understand is that organisms go extinct all the time. Yeah, regardless of whether there is human influence or activity, organisms will actually go extinct due to various reasons. Being outcompeted will naturally result in the species becoming extinct. Changes in the environment can also include natural things like volcanic eruptions. Climate change also occurs, ice ages and things like that. However, we classify all those things as background extinction rates, which means they're the stuff that would have happened without any human interferences. Okay, and so it's important to note, because when we talk about extinctions, you can then compare background extinction rate versus human influenced extinction rates as well. So I'll give you a few examples. Some of you guys might know the thylacine or the Tasmanian tiger. Now, the Tasmanian tiger was last seen in 1936, and it was actually the last living specimen that was in a zoo in Hobart. And this organism went extinct roughly around about that time. And funny enough, we don't actually realize that it was extinct until afterwards, because the last reliable sighting was of the thylacine in a Hobart zoo, and it actually had a name. His name was Benjamin. And then during that time, before then, they used to hunt thylacines quite extensively for their scalps, and then they used to obviously go for the fur, and so they were hunted a lot, and the numbers dwindled down to a stage where the government thought that there was enough time to try and protect it. So after Benjamin died in 1936, in 1938, the Tasmanian government actually declared the Tasmanian tiger as a protected species, but by then it was already too late. They hadn't seen any other Tasmanian tigers since then, and so sometime later it was presumed to be definitely extinct. Okay. Now we don't have any absolute concrete evidence that it has completely disappeared off the wild, but we haven't seen it in like 50 years or more now, about 80 years, and so we presume it to be extinct. Another example, something a bit more recent, 2006, the West African black rhino actually went extinct quite recently. There was, I think the numbers dwindled down to about 20 or so individuals up until the 2000s. Obviously hunted a lot for their horns, and so as a result, once again, you can sort of see these animals being, going extinct, and the last one was actually seen in the zoo in 2006 as well. So that was another incident of, kind of trophy hunting and hunting being a big factor in that. There are other animals and last recorded sightings. Some of them you guys are sort of familiar with, some of you guys aren't. The thylacine in 1936, the lesser bilby in 1931, the bandicoot in roughly about 1907 for the pig-footed one, and the desert bandicoot in 1931. The paradise parrot, and the dwarf emu, which is a kind of subspecies of emu in the 1840s. And so those are animals that have sort of all gone extinct. And one of the key things is that, in particular, Australia, because we are an island continent, we have a really high amount of endemic species, animals that actually belong to Australia and are found nowhere else in the world. And so some of the problems that we get is because we have so many native animals that only belong to Australia. When something goes wrong, for example, introduction of the rabbit or the cat or the fox, then all of your kind of endemic species go extinct, and our extinction rate numbers in Australia are actually really high compared to kind of the world average, I suppose. But that's just a few different organisms that are there. Here is a graph showing the kind of extinction rates of species from the 1500s all the way until now, and you can sort of see there up until 2014, I suppose, mammals being kind of the highest rate, and birds. Now, part of the reason for that is the fact that mammals are kind of a bit more bigger. Trophy hunting and habitat degradation affects them a bit more than the other ones. But the other part of the reason is also we've got more reliable data around the extinction of mammals and birds than we do about insects and other vertebrates. Yeah, and so it's easier to recognize when a big mammal goes away because we lose sighting of it, you can't see it, and therefore we can better understand that it's gone extinct, versus a small animal that sort of sits in the forest and no one's ever noticed it. So it could have had its entire existence without ever being discovered by science, I suppose. And then you can sort of see that the rate of background extinction is sort of moving around about that particular region. Okay. And the last part to look at is that in terms of actually extinction rates that we are experiencing, we're experiencing a lot of extinction rates at the moment. However, if you look at kind of historical evidence, that this is actually not the worst that we've ever had it. There are a few times in the fossil record where you can actually see these big major events occurring, which causes mass extinction, the loss of many different species, and actually large percentage of the world population as well going extinct. And so there are about 6 major extinction events that have happened in the past, or at least 6, I suppose. And they sort of happen around about these kind of major periods of times. And scientists reckon they most likely coincide with a major catastrophic event on the Earth's history. For example, a large asteroid or meteor hitting the Earth, causing these major extinction rates. And so you can sort of see there in about kind of 450 to 460 million years ago, another one about 380 or 390, another one about 250, 200, and then the latest one was about 60 million years ago, and they reckon that was the cause of the extinction of the dinosaurs, which then saw the kind of most of the Earth go extinct, and then mammals and your small animals coming in during that time. Okay, and so that's a major extinction, and they reckon there was a big meteor that sort of hit the Earth roundabout off the coast of Panama, or the Gulf of Panama, which is sort of where the meteor hit, causing a worldwide extinction. Yeah, and so that's kind of a few interesting ideas of the different mass extinctions that we've experienced. The cream color there shows the background extinction rates, and you still see there it kind of fluctuates a little bit, and then you get these giant peaks of massive extinction rates. Okay.